Today, we're talking to Jeff Umbro, CEO at the Podglomerate, about the future of podcasts and what might happen to human connection. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
But as I was preparing, I learned something that I didn't know we would be talking about. You guys made a fully AI podcast, as in the characters speaking in it are artificial intelligence?
Yeah, give me a second. I'll show it to you.
Okay. I just saw that Google Notebook LM thing.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
I have, but you tagged me in that actually, I think.
Oh, I did? Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, I've seen it. I haven't really done a deep dive, but there's a big Ars Technica article out there that I haven't read yet that's basically talking about how awful it all is. And how there are now people AI bots are reviewing the AI generated podcast or book or whatever it was. So
that is awesome.
Yeah. Here, let me share my screen with you so you can see this. So this is the video version of the podcast that we made.
Okay.
None of this is humans.
None of it's humans.
Welcome to En Route, a show that dives into the rich histories of countries, cities, and cultures from around the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
En Route
Why do we
curated
keep
and
saying
hosted
that we're
by
AI? Why can't we just pass it off as they're humans?
And produced by
Yeah. Why say AI a bunch? Because I don't want to pass off that creation as something that we did on our own for both sides of that coin. On the one hand, to be blunt, if it's not good or if the pronunciations are off or if the translation is wrong, then I don't want to be blamed for that. But then on the same note, that entire thing is generated from stuff that we pulled from Wikipedia. So it feels weird to kind of take credit for it. And ultimately, we didn't release that. I don't plan on releasing that. And a big part of the reason why is that it's good. It's much better than I would have anticipated, but it is not up to the standards of what I would want to put out in the world.
What about it specifically?
Well, you heard the big flashy introduction and that sounded pretty cool. And there's a lot of novelty because it is a robot. But there's no fact checking. It feels a little funny to be taking the script from Wikipedia because while it is Creative Commons, it's not stuff that we actually did the research on ourselves. There is the cultural aspect of that where if we were going to put that out, there are people that may view it differently. For example, if we did an episode about Germany or the Roman Empire or something, or even an episode about Ukraine, what exists on Wikipedia is not necessarily going to be the same thing that is culturally acceptable for somebody in Ukraine or somebody who maybe is Jewish listening to it, something about the Nazis or something like that. And really the only reason we produced that in the first place was to test the tools, and because there was a little inkling in the back of our heads that this could be really cool, that we can produce this thing at scale really easily and put it out in the world. But at the end of the day, the risks associated with putting that out there, especially as pretending that it's a real person, in my opinion, outweigh the benefits that we would see on the other side of that. Because, if I'm being honest, that's not a show that's going to generate millions of downloads and get tons and tons of revenue behind it. That's possible, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've been having this conversation. I've got 5 people in my network who are competitors to us that produce podcasts that I've just gotten to know. Mm-hmm. And when I kicked it around through email and through LinkedIn and stuff like that, and the reaction I got from them was actually not one I was expecting at all. Yeah. Because most of us are forward thinking with technology and adapting tools, but it seems that there's this barrier that I don't seem to have. I seem to have no barrier in the sense that, oh yeah, in the future there's AI avatars. They are everything from models to authors to speakers to singers, and people will see their profiles. They'll appear alongside of us on Instagrams and X and all those social medias, and we'll judge them based on their ability to put content out.
Well,
right?
I'll say this, that there's two conversations that I'm having. And there's the one that's happening like in front of a microphone like this. And then there's a second conversation happening where it's like people are talking about, hey, could we do this and just like not put our names on it? And
yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people have brought that up to me. Like, we're not going to do that. But the question has been asked many times.
I want to do it. I don't know if I want, I don't want to put my name on it and be like, this is a Joel Beasley or Pro Series production. But I believe that, okay, when the LLMs first came out, there was this one dude that wrote and published 900 books in 3 months.
Wow.
And he made crazy money.
Wasn't there that guy on Spotify who published a bunch of like AI generated music who just got sued?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I think that part of the hesitation, in my opinion, is also that like nobody really understands what's like, it's the Wild West. Like, a lot of people don't really understand the limitations at this point. And I think a lot of people are a little bit fearful of like being first and getting it wrong.
Oh, most people are scared. Yeah. Yeah,
so
I tend not to be, but I would create just like a Phantom Co. and be like, XYZ Media, and then just start putting out like, and I would make profile, like my idea is to make profiles like of people, like digital people through, using Venice. By the way, if you haven't checked out Venice.ai, I think it is. Have you seen that before?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Uncensored models.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Venice.ai. Uncensored models, so it's the same quality as like a GPT or a Claude as far as interaction with it, but there's no ideology programmed on top of it. It's just the raw models.
Understood.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I don't know. I'm very curious like how this is all going to work, especially how it's going to impact like production. And there are a lot of tools that I'm really excited about that are like pretty fascinating to me. I will also say that parallel to that, I have yet to like really meet anybody who is taking anything that's generated by a lot of these models that they're using like straight out of the box. Like, everybody is being incredibly thoughtful or trying to be incredibly thoughtful about what goes into like their models and like what the inputs are that are going to generate whatever comes out of it. And then everyone I know is spending a lot of time reviewing these things to make sure that they're being developed properly. And maybe it gets better over time. But I don't see it today. I guess, put another way, I feel like a lot of people in podcast production, at least, if you're operating at like a kind of a beginner to novice level, some of these tools can make your stuff really, really incredible and bring you to like a more intermediate level. But if you're already operating in like the advanced space, then these things really, like, maybe they make your life a little bit more convenient, but they're really not going to do anything to like advance the craft. And that's the big thing I've really been noticing across the board. Like I think people who are just hobbyists like should be using like ChatGPT to help write their show notes. But I think that like if you find this like, big, robust like production company that has a team who's doing that and doing it well, like ChatGPT is not going to do a better job.
I disagree.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I would say what I would do is I would take, and first of all, so my background's the software development world, right? So we kind of blanket everything with GPT, but there's a lot of models and they can be fine tuned. What I would do is I would take historical performance of the good, high quality human stuff and custom train an LLM, not just paste it into GPT, custom train an LLM with embeddings and everything to understand these concepts and then replicate it for future episodes.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like that. I think that is the question. It's like, that's working and it's a data-driven approach. But like, as you've seen, and as everybody has seen, like sometimes like what works is not what the data is telling you. And so I don't know. I think that there's an argument to be made on both sides of this. And like, and like we've talked about this before, like I'm experimenting with all this stuff and trying to learn it. I'm just not convinced as much as you are anyway, that this is the future.
Yeah. Oh, I am. I'm very convinced. And I can help bring you over to the right side here shortly.
Okay.
But I actually heard a pretty good explanation from Ethan Mullick, like this guy, co-intelligence, like working with AI. I follow him on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that. And he gave some example where he said a lot of people misinterpret. So what OpenAI is doing and what a lot of these model companies are doing is they're building intelligence. Mm-hmm. But they don't care about your use case. It's like all the people that are building use cases on top of GPT and stuff, they don't really care about that. What they care about is getting to AGI. And if you look at OpenAI's spec, they have 5 levels of AGI, and they've just crossed into level 2, and they're about to cross into level 3. And so they're trying to do that. And then they're basically putting it out to the world and being like, all right, here's this intelligent digital being that we made. Now do with it what you will, right? And so if you just walk up to the intelligent being and it knows whatever it happens to know, and you just start asking it questions, it's going to be moderately good at a lot of different things. It's going to be really great at some things, right? But what they also have given you, and not just OpenAI, all the other models in the technology stack as a whole, what they've also given you is the ability to work and train the model. So it's like if I give you a PhD person and they walk into your like business PhD, brilliant individual, and they walk into Podglomerate, your business, and you're just like, give me the answer to this problem. It's going to be fairly generic. But if you show them all of your business and teach them about all the intricacies of your business for 2 years, and then they're going to have like really good insight, right? And so that's the lacking point. They're putting the intelligence out. Yeah.
Yeah, but just to push back on that, like, I don't disagree with that. But like, if you're putting in that much energy into like training this thing, like, sure, at some point that is going to be really useful to you. But like, are you putting in more than you're getting out in the short term, at least?
Well, no, they're burning through cash like crazy.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. I don't know. I go back and forth on it. It's like, the AI conversation is interesting to me, but it's not exciting to me. I think that like there are more compelling things happening that I'm putting my attention towards. And like, and yes, is there like the fear that I'm going to miss the boat and like, we all get technologized out of a job? That's there for sure. But like, I feel like even if you're right, and everything like is able to be optimized to the point where like, these little ghosts in the machines are able to like do the things that we're doing better than we're doing them. I don't think that like the human element of that is going to go away. Like, do you think that like people won't be working in the future for jobs that can be done by these things?
Yes and no. I like to use the horses analogy. Yeah. So if you look at horses pre-cars, it's like involved in everybody's lives and everybody has them. There's tons of horse jobs. There's like huge horse economy. Now it still exists. There's still millionaires that have horse businesses. I mean, it's still a thing. It's just not at the scale at which it once was. And I think that's a lot.
It's going to be like artisanal podcast production and like the humans are doing it.
Yeah. The wealthy people will have it handmade by the top people in the world, and then the masses will have super high quality product that's just AI generated.
I don't know. That scares the shit out of me. Like,
it does, but I'm optimistic though. So I'm a hybrid. I'm not like all EACC, which is like this term about whatever. Computers are the answer to everything. I'm very optimistic. And what I'm trying to do is, without filters, understand the time scale. It's like I'm standing on an island and I see a tsunami coming. I'm like, all right, we're going to get wrecked by this tsunami, right? But I can't tell if that's 1 year away, 3 years away, or 5 years away. I can't tell. I'm bad at telling the scale of distances, but I can see it and I know it's coming. And so what I'm trying to do is figure that out. So my question of if this is happening is just completely answered unequivocally yes. But now what is going to like how long is that going to take? If you want to help better understand how poorly you and I as humans understand scale, my favorite thing to remind myself of how bad I am at this is to know that 110 years ago, we got electricity. Mm-hmm. Okay. So like we went from like no electricity, like no power lines, like nothing. And that was 110. That's two people ago.
Yeah. Well, I just listened to this fascinating podcast from Outside In from New Hampshire Public Radio about the history of refrigerators. And that was about 100 years ago. And there's a guy who, I'm going to butcher this. It's in the episode. You guys should check it out. But there's a guy who tried to live his life and consume his food the way that they would have before refrigerators. And the first thing that he realized is that he couldn't make a cheeseburger because, the cheese comes in the spring, you slaughter the cows in the fall. You need the grain to come in the spring in order to get the bread, and, lettuce and tomatoes grow in different seasons. And it kind of ruined a lot of things for me because they're saying that the apples that I buy, like outside of the fall, they're probably left over from the previous fall. And they're just in these like cold storage units where they've like removed all the airflow. And anyway, it is what it is. Like, I love apples and I'm going to keep eating them, but, but like it really put things in perspective. And to your point about how, we didn't have electricity 110 years ago. We didn't have flight until like 80 or 90 years ago. We didn't have cars in everybody's house, in everybody's like driveways until like the 40s or 50s. Like, I get it. There's a pace of technology innovation that is going to come. And it is going to be the kind of thing where like hindsight's 2020, and like when it's here, we're going to be like, how did we not know it was coming? But I don't know. Maybe I'm just being dense or like.
Let me talk about the optimism here.
Okay.
So the optimism that I experience is, and I got this from another guy I talked to who owns a podcast production company that's probably 50 times the size of you and I's combined, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, what do you think about this? I had dinner with him in Nashville this past week. And he goes, okay, I understand, because I sent him the Notebook LM thing privately. And he's like, I see that, but human relationships and interaction with each other and audience building aren't going to go away. And I'm like, he's exactly right. They're not going to go away. Also, people are going to develop preferences. Like, I believe you and I could be sitting here in 5 years, Jeff, and like, it's a common thing in our culture to have a preference if like you consume AI generated content, right? Yeah. Or if you follow any AI type people. And I think there will be a preference, especially for the next couple generations, for organic or human based content. And I think that'll drive the prices up, and whoever's doing it well will do well. So like, I'm not concerned about this as far as like destroying the business. I'm not concerned about that aspect at all. But I'm just paying attention to what's coming at us. Yeah,
I don't disagree with the idea that we should all be paying attention. I do disagree with the idea that this is inevitable, and I don't think, and maybe I'll be eating these words in a few years, but like, I do not think that this is going to be something that completely replaces humans in terms of like the work that we're doing, and I just don't think that like it's very good at it, and maybe like these things get better at storytelling, and like we're able to have better inputs to make them better at storytelling. I just haven't seen it, and I don't know. I will see. I just don't know that that's something that's actually like in our future. And hopefully, hopefully I'm right and you're wrong in terms of the business stuff, but also like, I'm not going into this like super naively saying it's not going to happen. Like, I'm paying close attention. I actually this morning did a training with my staff about like some of the AI tools that I'm using and seeing every day. And nice. In order to like make them aware of all of that. So like, it's a thing, it's very much happening. And like, you're right. Like, you can't just be like blind to it, but I don't agree with you in terms of like where I think this is going in the future.
Well, tell me where you think it's going.
I guess maybe your point about people like having a choice, and there will be like human curated stuff, and then there's going to be like, AI generated stuff out there, and they're going to live side by side. Like, that's probably somewhat true, but I think the human stuff is still going to be like the vast majority of what we're seeing out there. If for no other reason than like, what are humans going to do if they get like, worked out of these jobs? Like, yeah, well,
they're going to be spending time with each other in person.
Well, people have been saying that forever though, and that's not happening. Like, there was what is the Peter Thiel thing? Like, we were promised flying cars and we got Twitter. Like, You know, it's like, I think time and time again, we figured out that like if we reduce people's need to work, they're just going to find other ways to do the work. There are certainly some things that will be made better by like us using these tools. And even in podcast production, like you'd be kind of crazy not to use like these LLMs at the very least to give you like the V1 of your show notes or something, which will save people time. Where I do think that there is a limit to like what will be done by these things though. And it's going to be different for every industry, but I don't know, maybe I'm just like rosy eyed and like too idealistic, but I don't know that it's something that like is going to work. I also don't know why people want it. If I'm being honest, like, it strikes me as something that's going to like disrupt everybody's lives in a negative way.
Yeah, but we're bad at long-term stuff as humans. Yeah. So like short-term, if you walk up to one of your employees who's making, let's just say they're making good money, and you offer them a tool for $20 a month that does 80% of their job, you think they're not going to take it? That's why they're doing it, because it makes their lives easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that you're not wrong. I think that it's not going to end that way. And like, I don't have like a good reason for why, other than like, I just don't think any of it is actually that effective. And I totally get the argument that like, it's going to get better. But until I see it, like, it's a hard thing for me to grasp.
Yeah. And I completely understand too, right? I talk with developers, like software engineers who've been spending their entire years building this stuff. And even some of them have a hard time seeing it.
Yeah.
And so it's not uncommon, but
yeah. Well, I'm curious though, because like, I obviously we're going to continue going down this road, and like, we should have a conversation in a year and 2 years and 3 years. And we should talk about like where this actually went. I do have like very strong convictions for a lot of technology gains in a lot of different industries. For example, I'm incredibly bullish on Spotify right now. I think that Spotify at some point is going to become like the future platform for audio everything. You're going to be listening to books, music, podcasts, like your Sunday church, like
sermon.
Yes. Yeah. Your Sunday sermon. Like if it's audio, it's going to exist there. And I think that there's a few examples of that, like that is coming in the future in all different industries. I don't know. It's probably my famous last words. And like, I wasn't intending on coming like onto the show on the record to say these things, but
I know this is why it's fun.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't see it happening. And I do think, and I don't think it's happening because I don't think, like, at the end of the day, I don't think most people want it to happen.
Yeah. So I would disagree. I'd say most people, they don't want the negative effects of it to happen. If you ask them, do you want AI to come in and take your job and do all this stuff? They'll say no. But if you say, if you want AI to come in and do 95% of your job for $20 a month, they'll say yes.
Yeah. But then they don't have a job.
Like I said, people are really bad. Look at the national savings rates and like look at how people manage their finances on a national scale. People are really bad at long-term stuff. It's like sub 20% that are good at long-term strategies. You're in a weird world because you're pretty good at long-term stuff because you're a founder, right? You have to make long-term decisions, but most people don't.
Yeah, I get it. And like, I've seen it with a lot of my friends and stuff. And like, I've seen the stats and everything, but like, I don't know, maybe I just choose to look at the positive side.
Yeah. So positive side, I think the businesses that we're in, production businesses, are going to do great. I do think that the things that are on my radar as like things that I believe would slow down this from happening. So let's just say that in 100 years, it's all happened. Okay. In 100 years, their AIs are walking around the street and you can't tell the difference from humans, just like these humanoid robots, right? Yeah. So if we're good with that, like we'll get there. Even if it's not 100 years, let's say 1,000 years. So now it's like, okay, we got there. Now we're just in between where we are today and there. And so the question's like, how's it going to play out? What could slow it down? One of the things that could slow it down is, hey, our government, when healthy and working properly, is supposed to serve the people. right? So we, the people, if we get together and we vote that it needs to be some type of restrictions on this, then we can do that. And I think that'll help. However, historically, the government is very slow to adapt, and they only take action after lots of deaths. So like the safety bureaus, seat belts, all of these things usually only happen after a ton of pain. It's not proactive, it's reactive. So I believe the job loss will happen. I believe there will be a lot of pain. And then I believe they'll step in and say,
well, do you remember when Sam Altman went in front of Congress last year for a hearing on AI? By the end of it, they were literally asking him if he wanted to come on board and write the regulations for how AI should be served throughout the country and like how it should operate. And so to your point, like that is not a healthy response, offering the guy who owns the largest like LLM company to write the rules for how the LLM companies can operate. Like that's terrifying, I think.
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because you don't you have to have people who are competent on it, but you should, if you're going to put the board together, you need a board of like people who are competent in various areas, like competent in the business side of the LLMs, competent in the ethics side of the LLMs, competent in the actual programming of the LLMs.
That though, isn't that how like the OpenAI board was set up?
I don't know a lot about it.
There was a nonprofit board that owns the for-profit company. And the idea was that they would put a bunch of people on that board for all of the reasons that you just mentioned, like, the ethical, the business, the moral side. And at this point, everybody except the business side has quit. Like they don't exist anymore. So I think that's like, that's capitalism, baby. Like everybody's just going to continue to do what's best for their own wallets. And I don't know. I think we're in a really bad place in general. And to your point, like our government should, in theory, be functioning like in order to help us with this stuff and like be forward thinking here. But like we're still arguing about stuff that like the broader public figured out 50 years ago, So
we live in a clown world, but we're working through it. We're figuring it out. I still maintain my optimistic bent, right? Like I think things are going to work out. And then I think the best way to make sure things work out are to do good work, build strong relationships, and then every once in a while, take a peek up from your work, look up from your desk and see what's around you and what's coming towards you, what's gotten closer since your last check-in. And so for me, I've been following pretty adamantly AI, humanoid robots, and small modular nuclear reactors for 15 years. And so I have a recurring event in my phone once a year, and I go check in on these different spaces. And lately, the AI space has been on fire.
I saw that I think it was Microsoft wants to open up 3 Mile Island's nuclear plant so they can use it to power their data facility. It's funny because I love the idea of opening up nuclear plants, but like probably other things that we could use that power for. But
they're going to be, and then they're pushing it, right? They need the power to do the data centers, and nuclear has the best energy density ratio. And so they're going to be doing that. I've seen several of the top tech companies, I think Oracle did something too, but several of the top tech companies have funded nuclear projects because it's
including Sam Altman. I know we keep going back to him, but it's so funny. He has his hands in everything. I actually worked with him very, very briefly in 2016. He founded this voter registration startup called Vote Please, VOTE PLZ. And for like 4 months, I went and lived in San Francisco, and I helped run the comms for that organization.
Oh,
and
nice.
I didn't know who he was at the time. He was like doing something with Reddit, and he was at Y Combinator still. And he was like in an office, like on the other side of the room. He'd show up like once a week and throw his legs up on the desk, and like would talk through this stuff. I only ever had like 2 conversations with him, but it's so funny because now he's like set to rule the world, and it's just like the guy who had the voter registration startup in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the models are all out there, right? And so you can go access them. Like Venice AI is hosting many of the models. And so let's call them alt models from the mainstream ones, they're getting just as good, if not, they're basically parity with the commercial models now.
Well, there was, I think it was an episode of This American Life or something. But they did a whole podcast about one of the guys who helped develop ChatGPT, an early version before they put any of the filters on it, had given access to all of his friends at like a wedding party or something to use this thing. And they actually like had a lot of conversations with it. I think they published a book of poetry that this thing wrote, and I'd have to look it up, but it was a beautiful episode. And by the end of it, I'm like, oh, what are we doing? But anyway, are you listening to any podcasts about AI or like produced by AI or like outside of the realm of like functionally and technologically how this works?
So I'm going to be on the anti-AI pro-human side when content comes out. Like I will pay more for, I look at like concerts and stuff as a parallel, right? Like the artists now, their revenues are so far down from streaming. They make all their money on concerts and touring. I think we're going to see a push to in-person events. So I think we're going to see more like All In. If you see them, they do live podcast recordings. Daily Wire does live podcast record. I think we'll see a move towards that. And I think I think the conference industry is going to explode. I think it's going to grow significantly because we are soon approaching, Jeff, the moment where you don't know if I'm actually here or if I sent my digital twin. But if we're in person, you know that I'm there. And so we're a trust economy, right? Like we do business with people that we trust. And so I think that'll force us to do more stuff in person together or with our existing relationships we had before the boom took place, right?
Well, do you remember? Yes, I agree with all of that. But I think that has nothing to do with AI. I think people are just like on their computers too much. And I think that people want more in-person events. I think COVID really like highlighted that and put it under a magnifying glass that like people really need community and third spaces more than they have it. Really what I'm talking about is like Evan Ratliff, who is the founder of Atavist and was one of the hosts of the Longform podcast. He put out a show a few months ago called Shell Game. And it's really well done. His wife is the former head of audio at the New York Times. And so it's like this super reported thing where he basically like had an AI version of himself live his entire life. And I won't spoil it, but like he goes through the motion.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I didn't love it personally. Like it got a lot of praise throughout, but like ultimately, like he had this version of himself, this robot, like Evan, went in and like would try and like cancel his credit card or like call customer service or something, like the most basic tasks he couldn't do. And again, that is probably like, you know, a representation more of like where we are in that process than in like the future. But it really it just underlined to me like everything that I'm thinking is what's actually happening when people try and act on it. Separate from that, there was an article, I think last year in Wired that was all about like generative AI podcasts. And there's been a couple in the last few weeks that they're all here. And I remember the headline was something like, generative AI podcasts are here, prepared to be bored. And like, to me, that is this world. It's like the stuff that is being produced just isn't that good. And like the podcast that I showed you in the beginning of this call that we produced, like that was one of like several reasons why we didn't want to release it. It just wasn't that good. Like it was effective and it did exactly what we wanted it to, but like it was devoid of anything human. And like we weren't able to put in any like flavor or narrative or voice. And like you're literally just listening to a Wikipedia article, like read you like, you know, why you should go to Portugal.
But did you have software developers involved in this, or was this just you?
No,
guys
and I'm not saying that it's not
box?
Possible to do it. this was out of the box, more or less. We had we had somebody going through and like tweaking it a little bit, but I could be wrong here. But like I do stand by everything I've said.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're your experiences, right? And you had them.
Yeah.
No, I think I think we're really close to it being better than humans. I mean, there was that report Ethan put out. They took creativity, like this creative test essentially, and had things created, and they showed 2 sets to humans, and you got to vote on like which one was more creative, and the AI won, and they didn't know which one. It was blind, right? So the AI won out. So the AI was more creative at human creative task than the humans were across the board.
I mean, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
And
you know, I'm not running any of these studies, right? I just follow these people and like read it.
Well, and it's also like super subjective. It's like, you know, boring or creative is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. That's true. Nice. What are two tips for growing your audience for the people that listen that also have their own shows?
Sure. So the 2 free tips that I'll give you, and then I'll give you one paid
tips. One. Yeah. 2 free, 1 paid. All right.
Done. So the free ones are, there is a big difference between marketing and marketability, and you should make sure that your show is actually like worthy of bringing in net new people. I look at this the same way I look at like a website bounce rate. You can drive as much traffic as you want to your show, but if it's not sticky, then like people are just going to leave. And that applies to like your existing listeners too. Like you want this to be really like, you can grow your audience just by retaining your existing listeners as opposed to bringing in net new ones. And some of the ways in which you can make your show stickier is just to pay attention to stuff like your consumption rates, how people are listening, like where they're dropping off. Like, are you getting other like KPIs that you're seeing outside of the downloads? Like, I don't know, number of fan emails, leads generated, social media engagements. And if you're not doing that, what should you be doing in order to do more of that? So that's one. Second would be cross promos. And that's like a really easy free way to grow your show. It could be interviews on other shows, audio swaps, or feed drops. Basically just find like-minded shows, and you can do that by using places like Rephonic, which is a website that'll give you like podcast neighborhoods. Literally looking up your show on Apple and scrolling to the bottom, it'll give you a bunch of recommendations for what other shows people are listening to, and that are listening to your show. And you can use stuff like Podchaser, where they'll literally give you the email addresses of everybody that's associated with that show. And then you can just shoot them a note, and you can run these swaps. You can track attribution and conversion with something like Chartable, and you're able to really see like how effective these trades are. And then you can keep iterating to make sure that what you're doing in the future is even more effective. It's a really simple math problem. If you have a 1% conversion rate, and if you have 10,000 impressions, then you know exactly how many people you're going to bring in from running that 10,000 impression ad swap, and you can run multiple on every episode of your show. Anyway, I can get very boring with this. So those are 2 free ways. One paid thing that I'm testing right now, but early on is like incredibly effective. And Joel, you might be interested in this too. It's called Introcast.
Introcast?
Yes, introcast.io. It's this really cool program. It's run by this former like VC who like is doing this, I think, like in his free time. But he built a tool where you can run dynamic feed drops. And what I mean by that is you can actually dynamically insert a feed drop of your show into other people's like RSS feeds. So I could actually plug in, if both of us were opted into this system, an episode of Podcast Perspectives, my show, as the second episode in the RSS feed for Modern CTO. So anybody who goes to your show on Spotify, for example, will see like this most recent episode, and then underneath that, it'll say like introducing Podcast Perspectives or something. And this is a host read introduction from you, Joel. And then it'll be like a 3-minute clip of Podcast Perspectives, and then you'll do a CTA at the end. And then whenever like I run out of money to promote this, or we hit the impression cap or whatever, that episode will be removed from the feed and it'll stop running. But Yeah, and it's cool. And then you can just plug a new one in. And so you can do it on the buy side or the sell side. It allows you to do this like with a little bit less like overhead and like legwork. And I'm seeing pretty great conversion rates on this so far. We're pretty consistently seeing like a sub $4 cost per acquisition. And because it's opt-in, like Joel, you would get the ability to say yes or no to podcast perspectives. It's really effective because you're only going to have the ad appear on a like-minded show. And
it's only going to appear if I approve it.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, because you also have to like read the intro and stuff. Jury's still out. We're still running our tests on it, but like I'm seeing some very retentive listenership coming from this.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and there's 1,000 more ideas like that. Like we literally do this all day, every day. There are 10 of us full time. And these are the only things that we're ever occupied with. So, at work anyway, until the robots take over.
It'll be a while.
Yeah. But yeah, if anybody's ever interested, you can just head to podglomerate.com and reach out. We do this all the time, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. So
nice. Thank you so much for doing this. Podglomerate.com. Jeff, the CEO and founder, he's the man, and he believes that I am right when it comes to AI.
Hey, I might be asking you for a job if you are right. So
it'll work out.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm not concerned. I don't think it's going to happen. But thank you for having me. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you would like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.